Good evening and welcome to the Channel Studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5. US and Chinese officials have criticised each other in the first high-level talks between the Biden administration and China. Despite the virus, high-level meetings are happening in person in Alaska. Chinese officials have accused the US of inciting countries to attack China, while the US said China had arrived intent on grandstanding. Relations between the two superpowers are at their most strained for years. The US has pledged to raise contentious issues such as Beijing's treatment of Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang. Russia has said it always hopes for the best but is prepared for the worst when asked about the possibility of a Cold War with the United States. Diplomatic ties sank to a new low this week after US President Joe Biden said he thought President Vladimir Putin was a killer in an interview that prompted Russia to recall its ambassador to the United States. Mr. Putin later offered Mr. Biden live online talks in the coming days. The Kremlin's spokesman said Mr. Putin's offer of talks remained open and that he could do any time that was convenient for the US. Turkish police have detained 3 top officials of the pro-Kurdish People's Democratic Party in a wider operation targeting Kurdish militants after a court case was opened to close the party. A Turkish prosecutor filed a case with the Constitutional Court demanding a ban on the Kurdish party, the culmination of a years-long crackdown against the 3rd largest party in parliament. The party has called it a political coup. Protests continue across Myanmar despite the threat of a broadening crackdown by security forces. Eyewitness video shows protesters facing off with security forces. A protester who filmed the video said that police fired rubber bullets into the crowd, injuring 2 before the protests dispersed. Military and police have used increasingly violent tactics to suppress demonstrations by supporters of the detained elected leader Aung San Suu Kyi, but that has not put off the protests, with crowds out again in several towns. The total number killed in weeks of unrest has risen to at least 233. Samia Suluhu Hassan has been sworn in as Tanzania's first female president and the first from Zanzibar following the death of John Magufuli. Described as a softly spoken consensus builder, Ms. Hassan's leadership is viewed as a potential contrast to the populist Mr. Magufuli. He was a vocal coronavirus skeptic and had not been seen in public for more than 2 weeks when Ms. Hassan announced his death on Wednesday. South Africa's apartheid-era president, Frederick de Klerk, has been diagnosed with cancer, that's according to his foundation. It said the former president was found with mesothelioma, which is a cancer that affects the tissue that lines the lungs. Mr. de Klerk, the last white man to lead South Africa, turned 85 on Thursday. The foundation said he would start a course of immunotherapy next week. Mr. de Klerk shared the 1993 Nobel Peace Prize with Nelson Mandela after helping to negotiate an end to apartheid. Malaysia's foreign ministry has denounced a decision by North Korea to sever diplomatic ties, describing the move as unfriendly and unconstructive. In a statement, the ministry said Malaysia would close its embassy in Pyongyang in response and order all diplomatic staff at the North Korean embassy in Kuala Lumpur to leave the country within 48 hours. North Korea earlier announced it would sever diplomatic relations with Malaysia after a court there ruled that a North Korean man could be extradited to the United States to face money laundering charges. Russian scientists are trying to understand the scale of a potential threat to the environment in Siberia, with suspected microplastics polluting the snow. Scientists say they have gathered snow samples from 20 different Siberian regions, and that preliminary findings confirm that airborne plastic fibres are turning up in snow in remote parts of the wilderness. Microplastics, which are created when bigger pieces of plastic litter break up over time, and are increasingly being found in the air, food, drinking water, and even in Arctic ice. And finally, look away now if you are scared of rodents, because one town in Australia has been suffering from a huge mice infestation.
Oh, damn!
Thousands of mice have infested the country town of Gilgandra for several weeks now. Farming communities have been hit the hardest by the new arrivals. Supermarkets are also storing food in sealed containers, while 3 patients at a local hospital claimed they'd been bitten. Intensive baiting programs are now being used to reduce the numbers, although you could say anyone who manages to deal with the problem was a real maestro. And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the Channel Studios in Lagos.